Hello fight fans, welcome back to the MMA Girl channel. I'm your host, of course, Jessica, the MMA Girl, and we are here a bit late because, of course, I had some recording issues early on this week, but we're doing our UFC 321 picks and predictions and breakdown for this weekend's card happening tomorrow in Abu Dhabi. Early start time, of course, for everyone, including myself, who is in France, which I'm very happy about because my schedule is normal for this weekend as it isn't usually that early. So I'm very happy about that. Let's get into the Prelim card highlights that you must not miss. And then we'll get into my main card picks just after that. Let's go. So unusually, because for a numbered card, we usually have a prelim card and an early prelim card, of course. But this time around, we just have a prelim card with 8 prelim fights on it. And of course, the ESPN featured prelim at the end before the start of the main card. So the fights I think you shouldn't miss out on are very big fights. And there is going to be some great action on the prelim card before we get the main card. So tune in as soon as you can to get that prelim action in. And first of all, I'm going to talk about Nathaniel Wood. Nathaniel Wood, of course, an Englishman fighting in Abu Dhabi tomorrow. And he'll be taking on Jose Delgado. Nathaniel recently stated on his TikTok account that he will be fighting one more unranked opponent before he is given a ranked opponent in the featherweight division. So he needs this win. And of course, Jose Delgado has a great record. He's only been defeated once in his MMA career. He has currently got a record of 10 victories to 1 defeat versus Nathaniel Wood's 21 victories to 6 defeats. So Nathaniel has a big challenge ahead of him to get that last win before he gets a ranked opponent. So big pressure on Nathaniel's shoulders. Jose Delgado, a little bit less pressure, probably the favourite in this fight. I'm very excited to see what will happen between these two guys. I'm very, very hyped. We also have the returning Chris Barnett on this card. Of course, we last saw Chris Barnett in Abu Dhabi injure his foot whilst, of course, celebrating his entrance with Bruce Buffer. And he was supposed to be taking on Njoku, which he did. But unfortunately, as he was already injured before the bell rung, he succumbed to a first round KO quite easily. So this time around, he'll be taking on Hamdi Abdulwahab. Hamdi Abdulwahab has a record of 6 victories to 1 single defeat, and he will be very, very interesting in the cage against Chris Barnett. I'm very excited to see these two heavyweights take each other on in the octagon, a UFC 321 in Abu Dhabi. And of course, this card is heavyweight heavy. We have, of course, the main event being a heavyweight fight. We have another fight on the main card that's heavyweight for the number 1 contender spot for the heavyweight title. And we have another heavyweight fight on this prelim card featuring the beloved Walter Walker, who 2 weeks ago at UFC Rio weighed in for his fight against Muhammad Usman, despite unfortunately not being able to fight due to Muhammad Usman being positive for high testosterone levels and potentially PEDs. So of course that's being investigated currently. We're not sure where he's at currently, Muhammad, but Walter Walker still weighed in very unhappily because he was dreaming of fighting in his home country, Brazil, and at UFC Rio on the same card as Charles Oliveira. And the UFC shipped him straight over to Abu Dhabi after weighing in, and he was able to start training for a new opponent. And he'll be taking on the newly signed UFC fighter, Louis Sutherland, from England, of course. He trains in London and he is very fresh. He comes from the LFL and he was the LFL's heavyweight champion at one point. And now he's signed to the UFC with a record of 10 victories to 3 defeats on his pro record. Versus, of course, Walter Walker, who has only known a defeat once in his career with 14 victories to 1 defeat. This will be a huge heavyweight bout because will Walter Walker get that heel hook sub again for the 4th time in a row? Or will Louis Sutherland have a breakout moment as the new star of the heavyweight division after debuting against Walter? That is the big question here for this fight, and I'm very excited to see how these two do in the octagon once the bell is rung. Do not miss out on that one. We also have the returning Mateusz Rebecki, the Polishman, who we recently saw at the Apex have a insanely bloody war with the Scotsman Chris Duncan that unfortunately ended up in a UD loss for Mateusz Rebecki, but he still got the bonus, of course, for fight of the night and fight of the month. Of course, Chris Duncan also got that bonus because it was a huge fight and a really bloody mess, and Rebecki went out of that fight with a really enormous gash on his face. So this time around, he's taking on Ludovic Klein, who is a very dangerous, aggressive fighter. So I'm very excited to see how these two lightweights get it on in the octagon. This is going to be cool. Do not miss out on this one either. We also have the returning Ikram Aliskerov, who has a record of 16 victories to 2 defeats, and he'll be taking on Park Jun-young. Park Jun-young with a record of 19 victories to 6 defeats. We last saw Aliskerov fight on the card, Ian Gary and Pratis headline, and he won via first round KO, as he usually does. The only bump in the road that he's had in the UFC recently was, of course, against Robert Whittaker when he came in on short notice, replacing Hamza Chimaev in Saudi Arabia for the main event bout against Robert Whittaker, the Reaper, and Robert Whittaker put him to sleep in the first. Now, can that be down to the fact that he was on short notice, that he was unprepared for this fight? Maybe, but at least this time around, he can continue his winning streak if he wins again in the first or second round via KO. That is going to be very exciting. Park Jun-young is not an easy fighter to beat, so I'm very excited to see how Aliskerov is able to take on someone with a huge fight IQ like Park, and I'm very excited for this fight. Tune in, please. And for the ESPN featured prelim, we have Nasrat Hakparast taking on Killen Salkid, who Killen Salkid is coming in on short notice in this fight. He weighed in this morning. He is on short notice. He says short notice, no problem. He has a record of 9 victories to 1 defeat compared to Nasrat's 18 victories to 5 defeats. This is going to be an explosive lightweight bout for the ESPN featured prelim to kick off the UFC 321 main card. So kicking off the main card, we have 5 main card fights, high caliber fights with very much a stacked roster on this card. And we start off with a light heavyweight bout, and we're going to be seeing the return of Alexander Rakic, with a record of 14 victories to 5 defeats, and he'll be taking on Azamat Murzakanov. Of course, Azamat Murzakanov is a very dangerous fighter. Their height difference is, however, astronomical. Azamat is a very small fighter at 5'10", and Rakic is 6'4". They both weigh 205, by the way. They've weighed in this morning. The weigh-ins went well. So the difference in height here is insane. But hats off to Murzakanov. He has a record of 15 victories to 0 defeats. He is still undefeated, whereas Rakic has had quite a few bumps on the road in the last few years. He has not won a fight since 2022. He has currently got a record of 14 victories to 5 defeats, and he has lost to some great fighters, of course. He's lost to the former champion Ankalaev, he's lost to former champion Yuri Prohaska and former champion Jan Blachowicz. So no one can blame Rakic for losing against former champions, which is why you shouldn't sleep on Rakic, because I don't think Rakic is given enough credit where it's due, because Murzakanov is a dangerous fighter, but Rakic is also very dangerous. And I think after this many losses, another loss on his record would be a real stain on his professional career. So is he going to lose to Murzakanov? I think personally that he won't be losing this fight. This is a pick'em, so they're both at -110. I think Rakic will get the win here via late stoppage or UD, and I think he'll be able to fend off the wrath of Murzakanov and give him his first loss at the UFC, because Rakic's height difference is astronomical. He has a reach advantage also. He has a 78-inch reach compared to Murzakonov's 71.5-inch reach. So those things can be used against him as they can be used in his favour. And I think this time around, these will come to his advantage and he'll be able to get the win via UD or late stoppage in the third. What do you guys think of the first fight on the UFC 321 main card? And who are you picking for that first light heavyweight bout? Next up, we are going to be seeing a title eliminator fight, number 1 contenders fight between Alexander Volkov and Jailton Almeida. Of course, these two heavyweights are getting it on in the octagon at UFC 321 to determine the next opponent for the heavyweight champ. And of course, this is what I love about this card, because the winner of tomorrow night's main event will then know for sure who he'll be facing next, straight after he wins that fight, because the number 1 contender fight will have already happened between Jailton Almeida and Volkov. Now, we are going to be seeing another very huge, stark height difference. Of course, Volkov is a whopping 6'7", and Jailton Almeida is a big man too. He's 6'3", but not as big as Volkov. I've seen both of them around about in Abu Dhabi. They seem to be very respectful towards one another. They've taken pictures and videos together. I think there's no bad blood at all. It's all respect, all love here. Purely professional. The stats in terms of reach is practically the same. They both have around about 80 inches of reach. And I think this fight may go the distance. I don't think it will end in the first or second round. And I especially don't think that Volkov will win this one. In this fight, Jailton Almeida is the strong favourite with at -200. Volkov is at +170. He is the underdog here. A lot of people are saying Volkov will win, and he has a better fight IQ than Jailton Almeida. Volkov's record currently is at 38 victories to 11 defeats, compared to Jailton Almeida's 22 victories to 3 defeats. However, if Volkov is able to follow the blueprint of Curtis Blades, then he may be able to get a quick TKO victory, as did Curtis. Both men are very strong on the ground. Both men are very good at submitting people. So this could be a risky fight for both of those guys. And Jailton Almeida won't have it easy in the cage, even though he's a favourite against Volkov. But I still do want to go with Jailton Almeida for this one. I'm going to choose Jailton Almeida as my pick officially for the number one contenders fight for the UFC's heavyweight title. Whilst Alexander Volkov has made some great improvements, of course, losing to Tom Aspinall, I don't think he has what it takes to beat a fast, quick-witted and agile Jailton Almeida. Seeing as Jailton Almeida, as soon as the bell rings, he will shoot for that takedown, and that will be able to test Volkov's takedown defense. But I think Jailton will break him down at some point, and he'll be able to get that late stoppage via submission or ground and pound TKO. That is my pick for the number one contenders fight. And so officially, for me, Jailton Almeida will be the number one contender for the UFC's heavyweight title, taking on either Ciryl Gane or Tom Aspinall. Next up, we have Mario Bautista, of course, coming off of his win against the debuting Patchy Mix at UFC 318, where he won via UD, and he'll be taking on Khabib Nurmagomedov's little cousin, Umar Nurmagomedov, who, of course, is coming off of his loss to the champion of the bantamweight division, Merab. Of course, Umar has a record of 18 victories to 1 single defeat, of course, that defeat coming from Merab, whereas Mario Bautista has a record of 16 victories to 2 single defeats. They both have very clean, pristine records. They're both extremely dangerous fighters. They're fast on the feet. They're not fighters that finish a lot of their opponents. They're very decision-y fighters. And I see this fight going the distance. Let's get into the stats though, because there are very little difference in their stats. Of course, Mario Bautista is 5'9" to Umar Nurmagomedov is 5'8", and they have both got a 69-inch reach. Umar Nurmagomedov is an orthodox fighter, whereas Mario Bautista is a switch fighter, so he does both. Who will win this fight? I'm going to choose Umar Nurmagomedov. I think that no one comes close to Umar in the bantamweight division apart from, of course, the champion, who is a machine, Merab. But I think that apart from Merab, the most skilled person to come close to Merab is Umar. Umar and Merab's fight is a testament to Umar's strengths as well. So for me, unfortunately for Mario said he wanted to KO Umar in the first round. I would be so surprised and happy for Mario if he gets that done, but I don't think he will. I think that this will go the distance. I think that Umar will get the second or third round submission in this fight. And I think that Mario, unfortunately, won't be at the level of Umar in this fight at all. And Umar is, of course, looking to get that title shot again. He asked Dana White at the press conference if he was able to get another title shot. And I think he needs to prove himself in this fight. So he will probably want to finish Mario Bautista in order to prove that he is worthy of a second title shot against Merab. So that is my pick for this fight in between Mario Bautista and Umar Nurmagomedov. Next up, we have, of course, the co-main event of the main card of UFC 321 in Abu Dhabi. And this is not just a simple women's fight. This is, of course, for the women's strawweight title between Mackenzie Dern and Virna Jandiroba. And this fight was really under people's radars, I felt like, because we're so obsessed with Tom Aspinall versus Ciryl Gane that we're not talking about the fact that Dern and Jandiroba are going to be having a chance at strawweight gold, because, of course, Weili Zhang has given up her belt to move up to flyweight in order to compete against Valentina Shevchenko in a champion versus champion title fight for the flyweight gold. My opinion here is that both women are very skilled. Of course, Jandiroba is 37 years old, whereas Mackenzie Dern is 32. Jandiroba is 5'3" and Mackenzie Dern is 5'4". They both have a similar reach. Jandiroba has a reach of 64 inches to Mackenzie Dern 63 inches. I think, however, in this fight, Mackenzie Dern, of course, being the favourite and minus 150 to Jandiroba's plus 125. I think Mackenzie will take the win here. I think she has a great skill set, and she's a very complete striker and grappler. Jandiroba, I'm not taking anything away from her. She has a record of 22 victories to 3 defeats to Mackenzie Dern's 15 victories to 5 defeats. Right now, currently, when you compare both girls, I think Mackenzie Dern is very much more skilled in the octagon, and I think she will come home with strawweight gold. However, I don't think this fight will go the distance. We have, of course, 5 rounds for this women's title fight. And I think that Mackenzie Dern will get the 3rd or 4th round KO in this fight, ground and pound TKO, and she will be crowned the women's strawweight champion at UFC 321. What do you guys think of the UFC women's strawweight title fight. Do you think that Jandiroba will come home with the gold, or do you think the Brazilian Mackenzie Dern will come home with the strawweight gold? Let me know in the comments down below. Now, on to the main event of this evening. Of course, we have Ciryl Gane, the Frenchman, taking on the Englishman, the champion of the heavyweight division, the undisputed champion of the heavyweight division, Tom Aspinall. Of course, both men are the epitome for me of the new generation of heavyweights, whom are much more svelte, much more muscular, much more athletic. And both men have been named and nodded as some of the most athletic builds we've seen at heavyweight in some time. And if I were to say between both guys, Ciryl Gane has an even more athletic build than Tom Aspinall, but Tom Aspinall is just a big, dangerous boy, and they both are very big, very tall, very strong, and very quick on the feet, and good strikers. And of course, Tom Aspinall has the grappling advantage over Ciryl Gane. So in this fight, Ciryl Gane is going to need to work on that takedown defense, which I know he has worked on it since he started his training camp in March. And he's going to need to stay on the feet as much as possible to break down Tom Aspinall and take him into those championship rounds in order not to lose in the first or second round. Because of course, Ciryl Gane, he knows what it's like to go into those championship rounds. Ciryl Gane was saying that to him, Tom Aspinall is an amateur to title fights because he's never been in those championship rounds to know what it's like to be in the real deep waters of championship fighting. So these guys are going to make us very happy. I think this fight is going to be very exciting. They're both orthodox fighters. Tom Aspinall is 6'5". Ciryl Gane is 6'4". Ciryl Gane is 245 pounds to Tom Aspinall's 251 pounds. And their reach is similar. Tom Aspinall has a reach of 78 inches to Ciryl Gane's 81 inches. Maybe that little reach advantage that Ciryl Gane has may work to his advantage for his striking skill set. That being said, I think that will be able to get him to those later rounds. I think this fight will end in the third or the fourth. However, I still think Tom Aspinall will remain UFC's undisputed heavyweight champion. And I think that Tom Aspinall will get that done via submission in the third or fourth round. I think that he'll work on Ciryl Gane as much as possible, of course, and Ciryl will defend his takedowns. And even whilst he's on the ground, he'll defend as much as possible to not get subbed. However, I think in those later rounds where the fatigue starts kicking in, I think that Ciryl Gane will get submitted by Tom Aspinall. I'm very sad to say that because, as you guys know, I'm a English woman living in France, so I'm surrounded by Ciryl Gane fans and people who hate Tom Aspinall. But I have to say what I think, and I think that Tom Aspinall is the best heavyweight we've seen in so many years. And even though Ciryl Gane is up there, there's just nothing that compares to Tom Aspinall. I will be pleasantly surprised if Ciryl Gane takes home the heavyweight gold to Paris and surprises the world and shocks the UFC with that win. But I don't think that will happen. My official pick for UFC 321's main event for the UFC's undisputed heavyweight gold is Tom Aspinall. And of course, he'll be taking that back to Manchester. You cannot underestimate Ciryl Gane, and he will not lose in the first or second round, I assure you guys. Let me know what you guys think of this heavyweight bout and the main event for UFC's 321 card in Abu Dhabi. And who are you picking for the main event, and who will be taking home the heavyweight gold? Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great fight weekend, and we'll see each other next week, I promise, for an episode of my podcast. And of course, a new episode speaking about next week's exciting card. Have a great weekend. See you guys later. Bye.